If a person is asked whether they speak 2 or more languages, the question is ambiguous. A person may be able to speak 2 languages but may tend to speak only 1 language in practice. Alternatively, the individual may regularly speak 2 languages, but competence in 1 language may be much stronger. Another person may use 1 language for conversation and 1 or 2 others for writing and reading. Yet another may mix their languages in creative ways when communicating with others. An essential distinction is, therefore, between language ability and language use. This is sometimes referred to as the difference between degree and function. Before discussing the nature of language use and abilities, an awareness of often used terms and distinctions is needed. For example, apart from language ability there are language achievement, language competence, language performance, language proficiency and language skills. Do they all refer to the same thing, or are there subtle distinctions between the terms? To add to the problem, different authors and researchers sometimes tend to adopt their own specific meanings and distinctions. Family and community play a significant role in the language development processes of the children and promote the mindset for higher education processes. The family is the primary caregiver of children, shaping and nourishing the thought processes. On the other hand, the communities are the first exposed environment of the companies. The families are responsible for shaping the competence of a child to speak in the mother tongue. The primary exposures of the children are also ensured to be the same language speaking so that strategic mental growth can be supported. In the case of bilingual language and education, the families have the role of motivating the child for new learning processes. Community acceptance also states the segment to which children can be engaged so that bilingual learning can be shaped. Baker, 2021. The development of a child's approach towards learning and the development of bilingual education is dependent on the scale to which the parents and the communities are influenced by a language. Elective bilingualism is a characteristic of individuals who choose to learn a language, for example in the classroom. Elective bilinguals typically come from majority language groups, e.g., English-speaking North Americans who learn French or Arabic, Chinese speakers in China who learn English. They add an additional language without losing their first language. Circumstantial bilinguals learn another language to function effectively because of their circumstances, for example as immigrants or refugees. Their first language is insufficient to meet their educational, political and employment requirements, and the communicative needs of the society in which they reside. Circumstantial bilinguals are groups of individuals who must become bilingual to operate in the majority language society that surrounds them. Consequently, their first language is in danger of being replaced by the second language, a subtractive context. The difference between elective and circumstantial bilingualism is important because it immediately locates differences of prestige and status, politics and power among bilinguals.
Does your puppy turn his nose up at his own chow because he wants some of whatever it is that you're having? The new study finds that, when it comes to food, dogs recognize human social signals about what's good. The work is in the journal Public Library of Science 1. Researchers let pet dogs choose between two plates, one with a single piece of food and the other with 6 pieces. Unsurprisingly, the animals generally went for the larger portion. But when a human being showed a clear liking for the smaller plate, the canines likewise went for the skimpier choice. The dogs apparently recognized and responded to the humans' social cues. And not all cues were equally effective. When the human approached but did not touch the smaller portion, dogs ignored the attention-drawing gesture. For a social signal to influence behavior, it had to demonstrate intention. And the most effective cues also involved communication, such as looking from the food to the dog and back while talking encouragingly. For dogs, choosing a bite may depend on another's bark. Obese people have higher risks for diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, and injuries in car accidents. Yes, in part because they're far less likely to wear a seat belt. That's the finding of a study out of the University of Buffalo that will be presented at an upcoming meeting of the Society for Academic Emergency Medicine in Chicago. The researchers analyzed data in the National Fatality Analysis Reporting System of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The study included 1/3 drivers involved in fatal crashes. 2 years ago, the research group found that morbidly obese people were 56% more likely to die in a car crash than normal weight car occupants. The new study revealed that drivers of normal weight are 67% more likely to wear a seat belt than are obese drivers, which could account for at least part of the increased death risk. The researchers hypothesized that overweight people find belts uncomfortable and difficult to buckle. A weight loss program can address the problem in the long run. An inexpensive seat belt extension can solve it today. Doctors know a lot about prescribing medications. Take 2 brisk walks and call me in the morning. But for many patients, a light get-moving plan might be just what the doctor should have ordered. Many of us aren't exactly in peak physical condition. But a large number of people are actually deconditioned. So says the Mayo Clinic's Michael Joyner in an essay in the Journal of Physiology. After surgery, illness, pregnancy or extended inactivity for any reason, people might feel faint or fatigued when they try even mild exercise. These signs, Joyner argues, should be recognized by doctors not as symptoms that should be treated with drugs, but rather as a medical state of deconditioning that might be better helped with a gentle, guided exercise program. It might sound counterintuitive that fatigue can be beat back with exercise. But remember Newton, Isaac, not Fig. A body at rest stays at rest. And a body in motion needs to resist external forces acting upon it that might slow it down.
There are a number of possible purposes for a social network. You now have a good understanding of how to analyze the basic characteristics of your social network or that of another individual. Network is a social relationship which helps transfer information such as traveling from one place to another. It also helps people get to different destinations more quickly if they need to travel in a long distance or to destinations. It is suitable for old cities with high-density population like Paris. There are thousands of trips and too many travelers every day in Paris. The transportation network in Paris provides thousands of public services and links them together. A good network can help people with long-distance or multi-destination trips. In cities with high-density population such as Paris, a research on 7,000 young students and children in the United Kingdom is about how they participate in their communities, how they form values with character education and what influences them most. The outcomes involve parents, friends, schools and siblings, and researchers figure out which factors are essential and more important than others. Successful schools depend on the resources and support of their communities, and schools at the center of their communities are often the most successful schools. In turn, schools are vital to the social health of their local communities. Also, families are the first social unit in which children learn and develop. Good parenting can take different forms and be shaped by various social and cultural forces, but it invariably involves providing children with the support, care, love, Okay, another ancient Greek philosopher we need to discuss is Aristotle's ethical theory. What Aristotle's ethical theory is all about is this: he's trying to show you how to be happy, what true happiness is. Now, why is he interested in human happiness? It's not just because it's something that all people want to aim for. It's more than that, but to get there we need to first make a very important distinction. Let me introduce a couple of technical terms: extrinsic value and intrinsic value. To understand Aristotle's interest in happiness, you need to understand this distinction. Some things we aim for and value, not for themselves but for what they bring about in addition to themselves. If I value something as means to something else, then it has what we will call extrinsic value.
I think there is an intense competition at the moment to hire the most talented and most intellectually able people. There is a time when I think companies have many of the adventures in the world. That involves the company's world. It was the boss's world. Now I think it reverses the case. We have a shortage in talent base within countries and between countries, have an intense battle between companies to hire the most talented workers and also between countries, which are looking to recruit talented young people, talented young immigrants. We have this sense of immigrants being things that countries are battled to keep out, and immigrants want to get in, climb of the walls. I think the opposite isn't that the case. And the topic is that countries are trying to lure bright young people to get them to go to universities and get them to become immigrants. So, on many levels, talent is a premium. There is a shortage of talent, and so countries, companies, all sorts of organizations, of course, volunteer organizations as well as, are competing to hire the best and the brightest. You know, we have a baby boom population which is aging. We have an economy which is becoming more sophisticated. And so, for all those sorts of reasons, talent is a premium. One of the most amazing things that have happened even in my lifetime is the prediction of cosmology. When I started out 40-odd years ago, we thought we knew that the universe began a Big Bang. Some people doubted even then. We thought the universe was about 10 or 20 billion years old. But now, for really very sound scientific reasons, we can say that the universe did start in a Big Bang and it's 13.8 billion years old. So it's not 14, it's not 13 because a decimal point in there, and that's a stunning achievement to know that. And we also know that the laws of physics that apply to tiny particles inside atoms also explains what happened in the Big Bang. You can't have one without the other. A very neat example of this is that when you apply nuclear physics, that kind of physics, to understand how stars work, you find out that the oldest star in the universe is about 13 billion years old.
It's important to realize that the brain doesn't see the world around it simply as though the scene was projected onto a cinema screen on the inside of your skull. Before a scene can be observed, in your head, it has to be broken down into a number of different components for processing, and these components then have to be recombined into the meaningful form that we call an image. Amongst other things, the scene is broken down into its different colors, red, green and blue, in a way that's analogous to the manner in which a television image or magazine photograph is broken down into tiny dots of primary colors, which are too small to be noticed individually when we look at them, but which when seen collectively give the impression of a continuous full-color image. However, unlike in magazine images, the image that we see with our eyes is broken down not only into separate color components but into other components too. It is, rather incredibly, deconstructed into component parts such as horizontal lines, vertical lines, circles and so on. Each of these component parts is sent to a separate area of the brain for processing, with the different components of the scene only merging again when they are unified into what you perceive as the image. One of Guinness World Records' more unusual awards was presented at the National Maritime Museum yesterday. After a 100-day trial, the timepiece known as Clock B, which had been sealed in a clear plastic box to prevent tampering, was officially declared, by Guinness, to be the world's most accurate mechanical clock with a pendulum swinging in free air. It was an intriguing enough award. But what is really astonishing is that the clock was designed more than 250 years ago by a man who was derided at the time for an incoherence and absurdity that was little short of the symptoms of insanity, and whose plans for the clock lay ignored for 2 centuries. The derision was poured on John Harrison, the British clockmaker whose marine chronometers had revolutionized seafaring in the 18th century, and who was the subject of Longitude by Diva Sobel. His subsequent claim, that he would go on to make a pendulum timepiece that was accurate to within a second over a 100-day period, triggered widespread ridicule. The task was simply impossible, it was declared. But now the last laugh lies with Harrison. At a conference, Harrison decoded, towards a perfect pendulum clock, held at Greenwich yesterday, observatory scientists revealed that a clock that had been built to the clockmaker's exact specifications had run for 100 days during official tests and had lost only 5/8 of a second in that period.
The first inhabitants in Australia were the ancestors of the present indigenous people. Whether these first migrations involved one or several successive waves and distinct peoples is still subject to academic debate, as is its timing. The minimum widely accepted time frame places presence of humans in Australia at 40,000 to 43,000 years before present, while the upper range supported by others is 60,000 to 70,000 years BP. In any event, this migration was achieved during the closing stages of the Pleistocene epoch, when sea levels were typically much lower than they are today. Repeated episodes of extended glaciation resulted in decreases of sea levels by some 100,150 meters. The continental coastline therefore extended much further out into the Timor Sea than it does today, and Australia and New Guinea formed a single landmass, known as Sahel, connected by an extensive land bridge across the Arafura Sea, Gulf of Carpentry and Torres Strait. The ancestral Australian Aboriginal peoples were thus long established and continued to develop, diversify and settle through much of the continent. As the sea levels again rose at the terminus of the most recent glacial period some 10,000 years ago, the Australian continent once more became a separated landmass. However, the newly formed 150 kilometers wide Torres Strait with its chain of islands still alive.
With a good system of crop rotation, and especially with the addition of any sort of fertilizer you may be able to come up with, it's possible to grow crops on a plot of land for upwards of 2-3 years at a time with good results. Ultimately, though, you must let the land rest if you hope to continue farming there in the long run. Allowing a plot of land to rest for a period of time is known as letting the field go fallow, and there are several reasons for this. Allowing a field or plot to lie fallow means that you don't grow anything new on it, don't harvest anything and don't graze any animals on the land for at least a year. Sometimes a field will lay fallow for 2, 3 or even 4 years, but the traditional standard on many farms was to let a field lie fallow once every 2-3 years. This fallow period allows the land to replenish many of its nutrients. The root networks of various grasses or ground covers, like clover, have a chance to expand and grow, which further strengthens the soil and protects it from erosion. During the fallow period, there are many beneficial flora and microfauna, including cyanobacteria, which live in the soil. These microorganisms continue to be active at the root level, steadily improving the quality of the soil so that when you come back in a year or 2, you can begin planting food or cash crops anew. As economic troubles flare up around the globe, the earning estimates of American firms who do business abroad begin to flatten. Without these international consumers to buy their products, there are fewer sales, which means that inventories pile up. When there is more supply than demand, prices go down. Lower prices would normally cause demand to pick up, but in an uncertain economy people tend to postpone purchases. We see this tendency in the American economy with computer products where consumers believe that the prices will go down if they wait another 6 months, so they decide to hold off. This tendency causes further gluts in the market, which eventually leads manufacturers to slow production. They lay off workers, causing domestic consumption to fall further since there is less money to buy goods. These effects ripples throughout the economy and create a deflationary spiral that can lead to a recession or even a depression.